On this Friday night, the deepening danger of staying in Afghanistan. The threat of more attacks as the window is closing on getting people out.
We will be the victims of this warfare and bloodshed.
How the U.S. is now forced to align with the Taliban to battle a common enemy. The patchwork of provincial vaccine passport plans.
We really want to avoid that.
The potential solution to avert complications and confusion. The dilemma of undecided voters.
One party doesn't fit all of them.
Their biggest concerns. And silver success. Canada's medal count grows at the Paralympics.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
On the outskirts of Kabul's airport, crowds of Afghans are not giving up. Even after yesterday's horrific attack, hundreds of people tried to find a way onto a flight, desperate to flee the Taliban. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. More evacuation flights are getting out of Kabul, but the clock is ticking because we are now just 4 days away from the U.S. withdrawal. And with Canada's rescue mission now over, thousands of vulnerable people who had hoped to come here are now stuck. Today, the federal government urged them not to give up hope.
Let me be clear. We will not stop looking for other paths to bring these people home. We will continue to have discussions with our partners and explore avenues for them to return to Canada.
We'll have more on Canada's response in a moment, but we begin in Kabul, where people trapped under Taliban rule are now also grieving after yesterday's deadly attack. There are reports at least 170 people are dead. At least 200 others were wounded. Redmond Shannon has tonight's top story and a warning. Some of the images are distressing.
Funerals for the victims of Thursday's deadly bombing. There are dozens more, including for children, killed simply trying to escape. Our hearts are on fire, says this man. When will the killings end? The people who died lived in fear of the Taliban, but were murdered instead by an affiliate of the so-called Islamic State, ISIS Khorasan.
They're definitely trying to push an ideology, but they're also promoting an alternative Islamist state. So they're compromising the Taliban's monopoly.
Formed by radical Pakistani Taliban members 7 years ago. Despite warnings that another attack could happen, some Afghans are still desperate to get to the airport. But Taliban roadblocks are everywhere and the flights are winding down. Spain and Australia, the latest countries to end their evacuations. Britain, not far behind.
The main processing has now closed and we have a matter of hours.
US flights will be the last to leave before the mission ends on Tuesday. More Afghans are now fleeing by land across the border to Pakistan. This man says he had been at Kabul airport for days but gave up and headed to the border instead.
We are preparing for around 500,000 new refugees in the region. This is a worst case scenario.
It's going to grow. Some of the other countries in the region have indicated that they don't want to take Afghan refugees.
If commercial flights from Kabul soon return, they could allow those with visas to leave, pending permission from the Taliban, of course.
When it comes to Afghans who don't have that documentation, it's going to be much harder for them to leave.
Western governments, including Canada's, say they're doing all they can to help those trying to leave. But come August 31st, the Taliban's control here will be absolute. Redmond Shannon, Global News.
While the debate over whether the U.S. should withdraw continues, what isn't being debated is how poorly the withdrawal has been handled. The U.S. plans on removing all troops in the next 4 days, while many Afghans fear their country is on the brink of a new civil war. And as Jackson Proskow reports, they want help from the U.S., Canada, and other allies.
Under threat of imminent attack and a looming deadline for departure, the U.S.-led airlift continues.
We have seen firsthand how dangerous that mission is, but ISIS will not deter us from accomplishing this mission.
The death of more than a dozen American soldiers and dozens of Afghans at the hands of ISIS-K has not changed the fundamental goal. Getting as many people out before August 31st, no matter what.
We will be the victims of this warfare and bloodshed.
Shukla Zadran spoke with us from Kabul. She's staying for now. but fears being caught in a new war between ISIS-K and the ruling Taliban.
I really, really hope that international community should step in. Otherwise, it will not only challenge the security of Afghanistan, but it will challenge the security of the entire region and the entire world.
We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay.
In response to Thursday's attack, President Biden has ordered the Pentagon to develop a list of potential ISIS-K targets, though the U.S. remains squarely focused on leaving, not future interventions.
We will be able to fly out evacuees right up until the last moment. That's going to be the goal.
The Pentagon will house up to 50,000 Afghan evacuees at U.S. military bases, while scaling back remaining troops over the next few days. What happens without an American presence remains a grave question for the people of Afghanistan.
Even after we're gone, at whatever point, we need to use our leverage to try to induce a more moderate form of Taliban rule going forward indefinitely.
For now, there's an uneasy alliance between two former enemies who found common cause targeting ISIS-K. The U.S. has made it clear it does not trust the Taliban. Amidst this hasty and devastating exit, Americans have no choice but to. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau defended his government's response in Afghanistan. The issue continues to dog the Liberal leader on the campaign trail. He says Canada's working day and night to get Afghans to safety, but he offered little information as to how. Abigail Bimman reports.
We need to keep each other safe.
Hoping to focus on vaccines, the Liberals made an announcement at a restaurant owned by Syrian refugees. But again, attention wrapped on the thousands of Afghan refugees hoping to have a similar Canadian success story.
We did everything we could, but of course it got even more intense, more quickly than everyone expected.
Blaming the rapid and deadly Taliban takeover, Trudeau stressed Canada is working around the clock to find ways to get people out, committed to resettling 20,000 Afghans.
It is the largest airlift in history.
A flank of ministers tried to reassure Canadians bureaucracy is not moving at the snail's pace being reported by those in Afghanistan so desperate to get to safety.
Yesterday, our output was increased over 250%, with average wait times being only 2.5 minutes.
The government says it's working with nearby countries waiving some fees and has a special envoy to Afghanistan who's on the ground in Qatar.
If you're not there, you can't play.
Former diplomat Colin Robertson believes Canada needs to get back into Afghanistan to help get people out.
Move in as quickly as possible. And again, I underline that diplomatic recognition is not a seal of approval of that government. It's simply how we do business.
The government says regional partners are talking with the Taliban, trying to convince them to keep the airport open.
The argument is being presented that it's in the advantage of the country to have an open airport because it's a landlocked country.
But the August 31st deadline is just days away, and the Canadian government won't get into specifics about what's happening on the ground. Even on the question of whether they'll beef up diplomatic staff in nearby regions, we asked, and Trudeau wouldn't answer. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Nobleton, Ontario.
The opposition has also been highly critical of the federal government's response in Afghanistan. And today, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole finally laid out his party's plan for dealing with the crisis. But experts warn there are no easy answers. Mike Couture is traveling with the Conservative campaign. Mike.
Well, Farah, for days, Erin O'Toole refused to say exactly what he'd do differently compared to Justin Trudeau to help people trying to flee Afghanistan. Then, Thursday evening, he released a studio-produced video with a three-part plan.
Rededicate ourselves to work with our allies and Afghanistan's neighbors.
In addition to that, O'Toole said he would work with neighboring countries like India to create safe humanitarian and refugee corridors. Also, the Conservative leader says he'd provide political and material support to Afghans resisting the Taliban. At a press conference Friday, he said support would include intelligence sharing and satellite imaging. But it was unclear if, as Prime Minister, O'Toole would help arm those who oppose the Taliban.
Yes or no, would you give them weapons to fight the Taliban?
That's giving material and political support that is not meant to be offensive. It's meant to protect. It's meant to provide assistance, intelligence, to help isolate and keep the Taliban away from areas where they could harm people.
O'Toole added that providing flak jackets could also help keep people safe on the ground. As for providing safe routes out of the country, defense analysts say that could be difficult given the current geopolitical situation of the region.
You're going to need to basically make it safe for these people to leave very unsafe Afghanistan, to not just go into a worse situation or also unsafe situation somewhere else. The bottom line is like that all is much more difficult than trying to bring people from outside an airport to get inside the airport and then get on a Canadian plane. And that option's totally gone.
David Perry, like most everyone else looking at this crisis, wishes more could have been done a month ago. Farah?
Michael Couture. Thank you, Mike. Turning now to the pandemic, children aged 12 and up will now be able to get the Moderna vaccine. Health Canada says it is safe and effective at preventing COVID-19 infection in older kids. Until today, Moderna was only available to adults. This is the second COVID-19 vaccine to be authorized for kids over the age of 12. Pfizer received the stamp of approval in May, and there is still no approved COVID-19 vaccine for younger children, but clinical trials are underway. Manitoba is bringing back its mask mandate. Starting tomorrow, face coverings will once again be required in all indoor public spaces. The province is also bringing in new immunization measures. Starting in September, anyone wanting to go to a sporting event, a restaurant, or a gym will need to be fully vaccinated. And as Jamie Morocker explains, the Liberals hope new funding will push other provinces to follow suit with vaccine passports.
A vaccine mandate for non-essential businesses is a good idea.
And one the Liberal leader says his government is willing to fund, offering to cover the cost for any province implementing a vaccine passport. So far, that just includes British Columbia, Quebec, and Manitoba.
These mandates to say that you have to prove vaccination status in order to do the activities which we're used to can be a very helpful nudge.
In BC alone, the day after its announcement, COVID-19 vaccination bookings rose 124%. Reaching all eligible Canadians remains a challenge.
Now you're asking for public health information. And to me, that opens a can of worms that I'm not willing in any way to entertain.
I can't believe that there wasn't sort of a universal thing all over Canada to do it.
In Alberta, Jason Kenney has repeatedly refused the idea of a vaccine passport. Meantime, sources in Ontario tell Global News Doug Ford's government is considering a proof of vaccination proposal after months of stopping short.
We really want to avoid that patchwork. It could be cause an undue burden on small businesses and on individuals after already a very trying 17 months.
Ottawa has only committed to a vaccine passport for international travel.
Now, the federal government doesn't have the vaccination status of all Canadians. That's a provincial healthcare responsibility.
A decision that, if left up to each individual premier, could create more confusion than cohesion. Jamie Morocker, Global News, Toronto.
While Liberal leader Justin Trudeau pushed provinces to mandate vaccines during his campaign stop this morning, he dodged questions about his own event that appeared to break COVID-19 capacity rules in Ontario.
There are definitely more than 25 people in this fairly tight and crowded space. Are you breaking the spirit, if not the letter of the law?
I think Canadians are facing a really important choice right now. We're going to continue to remind Canadians that the big decisions about our future, they're being made now.
I'm not sure that was an answer to my question. So did you get special clearance to hold an event that exceeds current crowd capacity in Ontario indoors?
We're going to continue to do everything we can to keep people safe. We expect all of our candidates to be vaccinated.
Trudeau, like other leaders, are crisscrossing the country vying for your vote. Coming up, what the polls are suggesting about who could win on election night. The federal election campaign has been underway for less than 2 weeks, but polls show the race is tightening. The Liberals' quest for a majority government may turn into a battle to hold on to power. New polling done exclusively for Global News looks at public perception of Canada's potential prime ministers. Eric Sorensen reports.
Justin Trudeau's campaign kicked off, riding a wave of approval that had held steady throughout the pandemic. But questions around an early election call and the crisis in Afghanistan have forced the Liberal leader's focus from campaign promises to crisis management.
This is a very difficult day, not just for Afghans, but for people around the world, including in Canada.
The opposition able to keep alive the question, why an election now?
Mr. Trudeau has provided no reason for the election and no plan.
I don't think Canadians can afford another 4 years of Justin Trudeau.
Ipsos found Trudeau's favorable ratings are now exceeded by unfavorable. His net rating stands at -12. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole's net favorability is lower at -21. But NDP leader Jagmeet Singh at +6 is the only leader with a net positive rating.
Jagmeet Singh's absolutely become an asset for the NDP ticket. And he is clearly somebody, particularly I would say progressive voters, are prepared to take a look at.
And while Erin O'Toole's ratings remain low, he's also the least well-known, and polls show the Conservatives gaining ground.
Canadians deserve better.
Sensing Liberal vulnerability, O'Toole and Singh are both targeting the Greater Toronto Area, where elections can be decided. It was in the GTA in the 2015 election that the Liberals built an electoral bastion. Even reduced to a minority in 2019, the Red Fortress held. But when things start to turn, it can look like 2008. The Stephen Harper Conservatives won seats in the so-called 905 belt and the NDP downtown. By 2011, the Liberals' nightmare. The Conservatives and NDP attacked from the right and the left and took over much of Toronto from north to south.
And we are going to keep fighting.
The favorable response to Singh is partly his appeal to young voters on platforms like TikTok.
With the knots in the rows.
But O'Toole is better positioned. The Conservatives already within striking distance of the Liberals. A 5-week campaign leaves the challengers little time to overtake an incumbent Prime Minister. But if the race really begins to swing the other way, Justin Trudeau will also have less time to right the ship. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
From the Olympics to the Paralympics, ahead the inspiring Canadian comeback in Tokyo. And with that, another medal added to Canada's haul in Tokyo at the Paralympics. Canada's flag bearer, Priscilla Gagné, grappling her way to second place in the women's 52-kilogram category in judo. It's her first Paralympic medal. And track cyclist Kate O'Brien made an impressive and inspiring debut at the Paralympics. She didn't end up getting the gold. The 33-year-old Calgarian finished second in women's C4 500-meter time trial. It caps off a remarkable comeback story. O'Brien competed for Team Canada in Rio in 2016. A bike crash in 2017 left her in a coma with a major brain injury. Doctors initially weren't sure she'd survive or even walk again. Through intense rehabilitation, she's been able to return to competitive cycling. Up next, I speak with some of Canada's undecided voters. What will it take for a federal party to win them over? Ahead of September 20th, Election Day, Global National is traveling across the country to talk to you, the viewers, the voters. We want to know what matters to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. While in Vancouver recently, I spoke to people who consider themselves undecided voters. I asked them about what matters most this election and what might push them to make a decision. Tell me a bit about yourself.
I'm 69, I'm a senior, I'm retired from the Vancouver School Board as an educator, and I would love to see more affordable housing for my children and grandchildren.
Would you say affordability and housing is your number one issue this election?
Housing and ethics in government are my two main issues.
Ethics in government, tell me a bit more about that.
Well, I think our current federal government has been not transparent with us, and so I'm really undecided as to who to vote for to actually get rid of this government.
Is there anything that the Liberals could do to get back your trust and your vote?
The way they've treated Jody Wilson-Raybould, the way they've treated Indigenous people, it's just been really awful to watch. The only way to win back my trust for the Liberals is to get rid of Trust Fund Justin Trudeau.
So for you, it's really about him. It's about voting him out.
I'm leaning either NDP or Conservative, whichever one has the best chance of getting rid of Justin Trudeau.
My name is Jimmy. I'm 28 years old. I'm a fashion designer and a graphic designer.
And that's why you're dressed so well. So Jimmy, tell me about your number one issue this election.
Definitely climate change. I feel like that's the larger issue because a lot of the wildfires or even like drought, like lack of food, all that comes back to like how we treat the earth and manage our resources.
And so what do you need to hear from political leaders right now on that file on climate to get your vote?
Just keep what you're saying, because that's what I'm voting on, and that's what I trusted you when I put the ballot in.
Are you leaning one way or the other, or are you going to vote strategically?
One party doesn't fit all of them. You know, they all have different things that they value and all that, so I guess it's kind of seeing where my ballot would have the best bang for the buck.
I'm Marsh. I'm from Winnipeg. Just turned 18, graduated this June. So for me, the election, the two main contenders would be the climate, right, and how we affect that as a nation, and also our international effect on like the rest of the world, right, and how we deal with these crises that are popping up all of a sudden all over the world.
So you're 18, your first election. Would it be fair to say that you're still undecided?
Yeah, right now, definitely. You need to trust whoever's going to be leading you and controlling your fate, and also that they're willing to invest in my future, because I'm so young and, you know, very little time to decide, so I have to start reading up my social studies again.
Better brush up. Just over 3 weeks to go. And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is the Perseid meteor shower over Moraine Lake near Lake Louise, Alberta earlier this month. Robin Gill will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Until next week, take care of yourselves and each other.